right, hello and welcome to another expert interview. And today I'm delighted to be joined with Rob Jolles. Hey, Rob, how are you doing?
Good. I'm great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, and Rob is a author of multiple books and an expert on sales. And what we thought we'd talk about today is the subject of one of his books, which is around, presentation techniques and particularly how to sell within your presentation. And I think that's a fascinating topic. So, Rob, what do you mean by selling within a presentation?
Yeah. The fact is that there's, when we go through a sales cycle frequently, obviously there's the trust part of the sales process. There's the creating urgency part of the sales process. There's the presenting the solution part of the sales process. But a lot of times that solution may come in front of 3 or 4 people. Let's say we're working with a local hospital. Maybe we've now got some nurses or some administrative people. And so here comes that moment of truth of the actual presentation. Well, look what we've been equipped with up till now. We still seem to be running around with the 11th grade model of we're going to tell them what we're going to tell them, and then tell them what we told them. And that was really great in middle school, in high school. But this is the big leagues. And so when we talk about selling in a presentation, it is a hybrid approach to selling because we both know that if it's one-on-one, well, I hope you talk as much as I talk. Sure. We're going to try and balance that out. But when I'm giving a presentation, it's not going to be that one-to-one ratio. I'm going to do most of the talking. So the question is, what does that model look like? Is there a process that exists? And I don't think I'd be on the line if there wasn't one. So right. That's the part that I write about, and a lot of salespeople are gravitating towards.
So what are some of the common mistakes that you see made? Obviously, you said like following an old model, but what are common mistakes you see? Because, I often see that people don't put enough preparation into, they don't, structure what they're going to do. And as you said, they see it as presenting rather than presenting/selling, right?
Right. So, okay, that's a wide open question. Let me just nibble at it. One thing is, again, everybody seems to be tied to the model of, hello, here's what I'm going to talk about today. Let's begin. Ooh, I feel sold. So I think when we look at, and here's a piece that will transfer over from that one-on-one model. What do we do when we meet one-on-one? Well, we offer a client what we call a WIIFM, that what's in it for me. Yeah. Why aren't we doing that in a presentation? And in a presentation, let's call it a utility. Shouldn't I be, before I do anything, make sure that I present a case of an explanation, at least, of here's what's in it for you personally to hear what I'm going to talk about. Here's what's in it for you. Here's how it's going to help you on the job. And oh, by the way, here's how it's going to help that organization you represent. And the reason why I actually like to do 3 is, oftentimes I have a decision maker sitting in the corner. He wants to or she wants to hear how it's going to help the organization. I have a decision influencer sitting right next to him. How's that going to help us on the job? And it may have some actual end users. I started with a hospital. Let's call them the nurses, right, who really want to know, how's this going to make my life easier in the hospital? And so rather than fall in love with one of the 3, let's do all 3. And actually, that requires some work, some creativity. How are we going to slide into that? So I can't wait to tell you what we're going to talk about. But first, let me tell you what I've got today is going to simplify things over here. It's going to increase revenue, and it's going to decrease some of the customer issues you're hearing about. And I can't wait to get going. That's just step 1. But that addresses your question of give me one thing that we're missing.
Yeah,
that's a big one.
Yeah, no, I love that because I know people have been schooled nowadays too. They normally say, so who's going to be in the room, right? And, their contact will give them the name. And but very few of them go that much further into, well, what exactly are they? What is their point of view? What are they looking for? What are they interested in? And even if they do, as you say, even if they do ask those questions, they don't incorporate it into the presentation, right? They still tend to target it at the quote decision maker.
Exactly. And it's one of them and a whole bunch of the others. And a lot of times the decision maker is bringing them in going, I want you to hear this guy and tell me what you think. So we better not just fall in love with the one person in the corner of the room. And let me throw one other piece of the puzzle. And I'm not a conspiracy guy,
Sure.
but it's very common that there's already been a vendor in there, and that vendor has created relationships. And we don't know where those pockets are, but those relationships may not be that thrilled with the speaker that's coming in today. Mm-hmm. So we could be walking into what I sometimes refer to as a sniper situation. Remember, a sniper hides in the bushes. They don't say, hey, I don't want to hear this. They say, oh, I just have a question. And I don't mean to be offensive about it, but when are you going to get to the part that helps us?
Yeah.
And as a speaker, you kind of get thrown. But how do we deal with snipers? How do we not lose the room or our cool and deal with that? So you can see that we're not teaching math or algebra right now. We're really trying to establish utilities. We want to give people a sense of the big picture. I'll give you one other thing that most speakers don't do. We ought to be able to tell that audience in the first minute or two exactly what we expect out of them.
Right.
And that's often missing. And sometimes it's at the end of the presentation, what I'm looking for is for your complete understanding and support of this project that we're working on. Now, that might sound a little bit presumptuous, but guess what? Now for 20 minutes, I have an audience sitting there going, do I want to give my support? Is this making sense? And seeing as that's on everybody, that's the elephant in the room, why don't we plant that seed right now, then talk to it and address it, and then guess what I'm going to do at the close of this presentation? I'm going to double back and I'm going to remind them, this is what I expected, now let's see where we are. As opposed to oftentimes a group not exactly knowing why they're there, the decision maker just said, show up. Yeah. And so we're really setting expectations. We got utilities, expectations. So you can see there's a model beginning to appear that's a little deeper than here's my agenda for today.
Yeah, I love that what you just said there, and I love the idea of, because that for me that really exudes confidence. Because if you stand up there, I mean, most people are like, okay, thank you for having me here today. Thank you for giving up your time, blah, blah, blah. Whereas what you're saying is, you stand up with a lot more confidence, and you're saying, what's in it for them. And then you're saying, here's what I expect from you. And which is you're setting yourself on a peer-to-peer relationship rather than, you're somewhat down here and they're up there, right? I like that idea.
And sometimes, by the way, I'll just say, at the end of the presentation, you'll have at least 5 benefits as to why this product is going to do X, Y, or Z. And again, I have an audience now trying to figure out if they can find the 5. In other words, look, there's a rule, there's something we presenters often think about, which is the term, if you emphasize everything, you emphasize nothing.
Right.
So we really have to pick our spots. So when I'm working with a speaker or somebody who's selling a presentation, a lot of times I will begin with the end in mind, and I'll start with, if they walk out with nothing else, what is it we want them to walk out with? And if they go, well, I need them to understand blank, I move it to the front of the presentation. At the end, you're going to understand that. As a matter of fact, we'll check back with you. And so the audience really has a clear set of expectations. Frequently, unfortunately, when we don't do that, people are taking notes where they shouldn't be. They never had an understanding of the big picture. And there was our product that got lost in the shuffle somewhere. And one last thing, particularly in a lot of the industries I work in, financial is one classic. A lot of times the presentations are really governed by compliance, meaning I can't change the body of the presentation. But what I can do is I can figure out how to sell it up front, sustain interest in the middle, and then close it intelligently at the end, and not get into any hot water with compliance. Because that's the big leagues of presenting now in a sales situation. We can't just go creating our own presentation, not with the big corporations.
So so you've set up the scene, you've established, confidently established, etc. So what next?
Well, after we set it up, and by the way, I'm going to tell you that I'm actually coming down an acronym. So let's call it a UPOP.
Okay.
We've established a utility. We want that next P is what we call the product. In one sentence, what are we doing for these 20 minutes? Because adults, and I'm always following the way adults want to learn.
Yeah.
We know for a fact that adults learn better when they understand the big picture of a presentation. So, well, I want you to have an understanding. It can be vague, an understanding of blank. Utility, product. Now the process. What are you going to talk about? What are those three main? But sometimes what we lose even in the process is how are you going to talk about it? In other words, is there a handout? Are you going to expect things from us while you're talking? Should we take notes? Are we allowed to ask questions?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of stuff, when you set the expectations there, you calm that audience down. Remember, at the end of the day, just like a sales scenario, if nothing else, I want you to like me more. And then it's over. So the more we can get rid of some of that nervousness, the better. So we have a utility, a product, a process. Now comes the objective, what I expect out of you. And then back to me again, here's who I am, and here's why me, okay? And so that we call that process justification. And now maybe now we're ready to transition in. And now the ball game is this. How do we sustain interest throughout? Right. Well, we can do it through questions. Unfortunately, our models are all wrong because we got modeled in school with really a very myopic approach to questioning. First of all, they were almost what we call factual based, which meant, can you tell me the capital of, Kansas or whatever? And, they were scary. Well, I'm not there to scare them. I'm there to win them over. So I like opinion questions. I like comparison questions. I like a case study question. And even the technique with which I deliver it. We only had one model, direct. Mr. Jolles, can you? And here comes the question. What about an overhead? Can anybody tell me? That takes the pressure off the audience. It allows the one or two people that always have their hand up to get some words out. And remember, although it won't be 50-50, the more they talk, the more they're going to like my presentation. So questioning needs to be looked at as well. I like relay questions where I'm asking one and then moving it to another. Nice. I like reverse questions where a question comes in and it's so good I move it back out to the audience. They're the nurses, they know, and remember they feel good when I tell them. You know what? I'll bet that's a great question. I'll bet many of you have seen it. How would you approach that? That's what a pro does. So we go deeper than direct and fact, and we expand a little bit, and then we sustain that interest through our movement. Look, you looked in the back and you saw a bobblehead that I call a robblehead. I tell you, as a speaker, I've seen many people give out a pen or a golf ball or a T-shirt. I still haven't bumped into anybody who's given out a robblehead, and those audiences don't forget it. Right. So anything that I can do to demonstrate some creativity, intelligently, analogies, a short story. There's so many ways to let that audience get creative without losing our timing. Right. Timing's important. Yeah. So, and just sandwiching around that, the basic information that the company told us we've got to cover, which we will. But really, at the end of the day, in a presentation, although I never say this aloud to an audience, in my head, I'm thinking, you don't have to remember everything I said. Right. You just have to be comfortable with what I'm showing you and who's showing it. And if we do that, I win the room.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's always that saying from somebody, I can't remember who now, but it's you remember how people made you feel. You don't remember so much what they said, and I think that's a key part. But I really like what you're saying about questioning, because if I think to most presentations I've sat through, what do people say? They go, after a little while, they say, well, I want to keep this interactive. Do you have any questions? And you're like, well, no, or and you normally get silence, or you get some random question that's completely off topic. So I like that idea. The other part is, as you're saying, being creative and being on your game and energetic. Because I always feel like if the presenter doesn't come across like they're excited about what they're talking about, how am I supposed to be?
You're right. And actually, when I work with an audience, sometimes I'll show them I'll show them 30 ways to keep people interested, and I always close with the 30th, which is the great equalizers, I call them, energy and enthusiasm. You know what? You can drop that piece over there. You can stumble on that. A chord can knock you down. The audiences will forgive almost anything, but they will not forgive a lack of energy and enthusiasm. And the glass half full on that is That's one thing that's 100% under our control.
Yeah.
I really can't control if a jackhammer goes off outside or the power goes out, or so many things I can't control, but I can always control my own effort. And that actually builds confidence in many speakers. So it's very important. The only other, let me just sandwich one last thing for you, and that is this. We can't fall asleep on the close either. Now, in sales, we're actually asking for somebody's business, and that's fine. But in the close in a presentation, it may not be an ask for business, but but somebody told me this, so I made it my own, and I really believe this. Think of a presentation the way a magician approaches an act. A magician begins with their second best trick, but they close with their best trick. So the important thing here is we've gone through, we've sustained interest. Listen, it may very well be we're covering information. It's not all super exciting. But when we're ready to finish, how many times have we watched a speaker go, and so that's the way we do it, and well, any questions? Okay, well, thank you. The way most pros will finish is, any questions? That's great. Well, let me finish with one last story. It happened to me 2 years, and this is the one that always gets that audience, because when we finish, we want to, like a gymnast, we want to stick that landing. And we have to be careful, because what happens is a lot of times the person who brought us in, as we're wrapping up, we'll go, do you have any more questions for Rob? And there may be one. And I'll answer it, and they'll go, look at me and go, okay, thank you, Rob. And I'm sort of shuttled out. So be aware that sometimes you have to kind of grab back control. So when that person who brought you in has any other questions for Rob, and you answer it, they go, well, and you just put your finger up and say, Larry, can I finish with just one last story? One last thing I want this audience to remember. And remember, they're there. They want you to be successful. They'll step aside. But the real world is sometimes you're going to have to make a landing spot for that close. It'll get taken away from you.
Yeah. So again, this again reinforces the point that you need to stay in control and be confident right throughout, right up until the end. Because I agree with you, a lot of presentations, peter out, and there is that temptation when maybe you've been up for 30 minutes, and there is that temptation that you're like, oh, okay, finally it's coming to a close. That's obviously something you say you've got to really resist and realize that no, this is your moment.
This is your moment. And that's why I reinforce that. Think like a magician. What is my best trick / story / quote / analogy? What's the best one? And we all have one. And don't lead with that one. Lead with the second best one.
Right.
But hold that last move. So that's what you leave that audience with, almost a breathless moment. Then you can turn, nod. I'm not a big fan of, thank you. I am a fan of thank you for your questions, and just gesturing over. And that's the way I want to finish that presentation. It actually mirrors a regular one-on-one close.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're almost tired and exhausted, and we show them, and it makes sense, and we seem to bumble our way through the most important question, which is, I'd love to work with you today. Something. So if there's an ask, get ready to ask it. But think out that close, think out that opening, which will let you kind of get your momentum going, and then the body will take care of itself.
Well, that's fascinating. Is there anything else that you want to add before we finish? Just a last pointer for people?
Last pointer is this. I make timing very important. So, I think of it like a hot air balloon. I only rode in one once, but it was very interesting. We never really stayed at one level. We went up, and when we got too high, took the heat off. And then we came down. We went past that middle line. Then he put it back on, and we went up again. And so we sort of were maintaining roughly a middle area. If it's 20 minutes or 2 hours or 2 days, know where you need to be. Think like a hot air balloon. Don't rush the last 3 minutes. See yourself where you need to be, and put some heat on that balloon if we're dropping a little bit to get it back to that line, and take the heat off. And if we're going a little bit too fast, let the heat out, bring the balloon back. But sticking that landing means not only finishing properly, But looking at that guy who said 20 minutes or that company that said 1 hour and you're done at 59:59, the meeting planner likes it. The CEO likes it. Don't fall in love with your voice. Make timing important.
Yeah, that's fantastic, because there's nothing worse than seeing somebody at the back of the room going, "Ugh, God," over, and then the presenter saying, "Oh, okay, I'm going to skip through these last few slides really quickly," and it's obvious that everything is out of sync.
Right. And you hit on a really good point. I never want to use the words, "I'm going to skip through these quickly," and that's why 3 minutes in, I know I'm a slide behind. I know I got to just add I'm going to drop that story out that frequently I tell to get that balloon back to at that level altitude again. But because actually when you go short on a presentation, sometimes the client's wondering what are we missing?
Right.
And when you go long, you're throwing their meeting off, you're throwing their day off. And it's even though you think you're on fire as a presenter, all the analytical people in the room are a little bit ticked off that we didn't finish on time. So timing is critical.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, well, Rob, this has been a fantastic conversation. So can you just tell the viewers and listeners a little bit more about yourself, how they can find out more about you and where they can contact you?
Well, the easiest way to contact me is www.jolles.com. And I write books, I give seminars around the world and keynotes, things like that. But I will tell you that Friday morning, I write every other week something called a blarticle. I trademarked it. It's not a blog, it's not an article, it's a blarticle. But I'm writing about and speaking about, and I've done a couple interviews on somebody that was very important to me in my life, and that's Jerry Lewis.
Okay.
Passing of Jerry Lewis, we understand that later in his life, he was a little unfiltered, but this is a man who raised $1.5 billion for charity. This is a man who really taught us what physical humor was. And I think there's some real business lessons about his work ethic and his ability to innovate and the patents he had for some of the tools he used to direct and star in his own movies. That is a life well lived. And but if you go to my site Friday, you can sign up for the blarticle, but you'll see that. But that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I look forward to reading that, and I look forward to maybe one day I will earn myself a Robblehead. That's on my bucket list now.
It's not easy. They're never for sale. Although I sold one in an auction once for $200, but that was a charity.
Yeah, okay.
You'll earn that Robblehead anyway. Thank you. It's been great talking to you.
Thanks, Rob.